Well, welcome to the second part of our meeting, and this is being live streamed, and so that hopefully you'll be able to follow some of the things that we're discussing. We've already had a first part of a meeting, which was a closed section for the purpose of confidentiality. Some of the sensitive nature of things that we're discussing, we couldn't broadcast that one, but hopefully you'll be able to get enough information from this one in how, as Police and Crime Commissioner, we're able to hold the senior leadership team in Bedfordshire Police to account for the delivery of our police and crime plan and keeping our county safe as well. So to start off with item number 9 on the agenda, I will just say a few updates around the police and crime plan and the 100-day summary, and then Claire, I'll invite you to say a few bits as well.
Yeah, sure.
So one of the key highlights from the last 100 days for me has been some of the investment we've been able to put into our cyber team, where they've had the extra capacity now to investigate cyber crimes using the special vans, as I like to call them. They're parked in front of my office, and they look good. But they do a lot of really good work in terms of helping to clear up the backlog of cyber-related crimes. So that's really, really good. We'll also look to hear some updates around the community policing plan, which we've got established since around May, June this year, and that is going really well. I'm really pleased to see some of the updates from the community policing teams on social media of their work right across the county, and hopefully we'll be able to get some updates on Primrose as well, which has been going really, really well in some parts, in Bedford in particular. But overall, there's some really positive things happening. The Summer of Fun program, which we had, that saw about over 500 young people take part in the boxing and martial arts activities right across all of Bedfordshire. We had about 22 sessions held over a 3-week period, and the outcomes from this have been, the feedback rather from this have been very, very positive from parents of the youngsters. And Claire, you want to come in as well?
Certainly. So the Commissioner's plans for the next couple of months feature 5 key areas. The first one being the funding model for 22-23. That model is currently open and it closes on October 15th. With that plan, the Commissioner is going to close the gap on the postcode lottery we have with domestic abuse services across the county, so it will be a fair service for everyone. That also includes support for sexual abuse and for counselling support as well. At the minute in Bedfordshire, there is a significant wait for any form of counselling service, and we know that once people have experienced crime, that can be very detrimental if they don't get help early on. The second area is that of working with the community policing teams, who really opened up their community meetings with the OPCC, and we go together and listen to priorities set by the local people. We then go back in the days of action, and we have 4 of those planned over the next 2 months. The third area is the technological support for people to get access to their crimes. We are starting that work as well as engaging with the national programme that's ongoing in policing. The fourth area is the focus on victim referrals. We're going to talk about that later on in this meeting, but they have gone down in number, and we know that we have got resource to support more people. So we need to get the message out to people that there is support there for them once they've been a victim of crime or a witness to crime. And the last section is the progress we're making with our charity, the Bedfordshire Police Partnership Trust. We have worked with local authorities for a long time on getting the right level of support to vulnerable people. We're now working with smaller councils of parish, town and wards in getting some bespoke support established as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Now moving on to number 10 on the agenda. We're now going to have an update from ACC Sean Barter around the community policing model and establishments.
Thank you, Commissioner. In relation to this month, there's no change, which is a good news story, because we're still at 63 police constables against the establishment of 67, so we haven't lost any. But the good news is that the recruitment for those outstanding posts is ongoing, and we've got the next posting meeting on the 4th of October. So thereafter we'll be able to update further in terms of those gaps filled.
Do you know which areas those vacancies are?
There are 2 in Luton, 1 in Leighton Buzzard, and the 4th one, that area is come back because I don't know it from the top of my head.
So I think our only concern remains then that we're still counting the PCs that are currently acting up as sergeants within those numbers, so that's 4, and then the police now numbers are also in there, which is 9. So is the reality on the ground for community officers a bit different to that kind of gap of 3?
I think if I could just jump in cloud on the police now bit, we should. Police, we've looked at police now, they are properly solving, they're embedded in community teams, and at the moment they are part of our numbers, we are treating them as part of our numbers. I think, we can see how the force is going to grow over, I could give some really reassuring messages to the public about where we are now in terms of headcount, where we're going to be. So that's something I think we could bring back in due course, but at the moment, I just mentioned we are considering the police now as part of the overall numbers, and we continue to do so for the foreseeable. Doesn't mean we won't bring it back and look to have them as extra, but they are undertaking problem solving in our communities, and they're part of the community teams.
So when those police now students finish their project, for example, in policing in the community, and then move on to the plan will be to replace them, would that be with police now students or with full-time, with other officers?
We're going to continue to recruit in there, but obviously we're still supporting police now. So
Right.
we can have movement within that.
So you're
but we
replacing
will
with police
continue.
now, and not replacing with community numbers? Okay. So the majority of police now, do they go on to stay in community, or do they go to respond?
Again, it depends on skills, personal aspiration, but those numbers there will be the establishment of 67 we will meet according to with relevant experience costs.
I guess for me, it's not just for the record, in case of any police now students who are watching this is not about trying to diminish in any way, shape or form the contribution or the capacity of police now students. I guess for me, is to ensure that the establishment of community is as we say it's going to be, and that number does not start to diminish over time because the police now students then move on and
They do a brilliant job, and I think they're a
Yes.
brilliant asset to the community teams, and they do some fantastic problem solving. But at the moment, they are within those numbers, they are within those teams, and they're delivering community policing. Our commitment to community policing commission is no different than your own aspiration. The chief is committed to maintaining those numbers. But equally, we have to balance that as with other pressures where we're experiencing control room and other areas of demand for the same type of skill set. But as Sean said, the good news is we've maintained the same number. We are recruiting, which is the right direction, but it's going to be marginal gains at the moment because of balancing the other pressures within the organisation.
And what about the PCSO numbers in that team?
They're within it, so that's why I'm thinking it might be better if we display the information differently then,
Okay.
so that, because we answer to police and crime panel and they'll ask us, they'll look at that and say 6 in my area then, but actually if they're police now, maybe they could be a bit like Aurora are, just within a separate bit.
I think what we could probably do is just really include the community cohesion, the resources that we would like to put at the airport as part of the community policing team there, and our rural team. Because actually, the good news is that there's more like 120 officers in community policing in different specialist roles, which is important for the public to know.
Yeah, they don't feature on here.
And these are just the community hubs.
Absolutely. And one thing I just want to touch on as well is about the deployment of community teams and what they actually focused on doing. Are they what they're tasked to do? How do you sort of envision that moving forward? I mean, I understand that sometimes they also do some offender management job. They're tasked with OCD, things like that. How much of their time are they actually being dedicated to community proactive policing work?
Yeah, that's that last element that you talked about in terms of tasking for those. The aspiration for our community teams is to know their area. So we know that a PCSO may not be able to tackle an OCG on their own. But what's important is that they know that there is an OCG on their area, and that if they are able to, adjust their routes to and from their existing commitments accordingly, so they are sighted on what's happening in that area. And that's and they like that. They like to know what's on their area and be involved in some of those other investigations. So, for example, if some of our more proactive teams are taking an interest in that area, the PCSOs will be involved. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Commissioner, you talked about Operation Primrose, and that's a huge success story in terms of community policing, because within the Bedford area and Tavistock Street in particular, that was highlighted by residents, by businesses, that was an area of concern for the local community. And through our internal mechanisms, the local chief inspector and the inspector and the team weren't able to address that on their own. So they came into the force tasking arena, and together with Bedford Borough, we had a combined, wider partnership approach to tackling that. You asked about it, and it's still ongoing because we've had some huge success, but we want to build upon that. And the latest update I have, and this is through the FTTCG, is monthly. So we've continued it as a further priority for this existing month. Of the businesses spoken to in the last period, 85% have said that street drinking in that area has reduced. 71% have said that begging has reduced. However, some did say that they seem to have moved to operating in and around the streets after 7 p.m. So we've adjusted our response and our patrol to counterbalance that as well. And then overarching just some headline figures. So for the same period, so from June through till September last year, 93 calls were received in relation to street drinking and antisocial behaviour. That's reduced by 65% this year, and again last year 54 crimes were reported and recorded within Tavistock Street. This year has seen a 52% reduction. So not only are we seeing the tangible difference in terms of crime data, but we're getting that feedback from businesses and local residents.
Are we seeing any evidence of displacements into neighbourhood areas?
And that's really
That is
important.
really good.
Yeah,
That's really good.
because we often get that, and all we're doing is moving it along. No, because of the excellent work that some of our partners and charitable organisations are supporting with us, it's actually intervention.
Is there one coming in, Trevor?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of our community teams, so we've got one of them working in their area, problem solving, and when they can't solve that on their own with, using local partnerships, we will give them additional resources, either through the tasking process, the daily management process, or through their own leadership, so they might need to do a warrant, and then that'll either be a surgeon in the community team, or they can bring a central tasking team, other resources which other units can call on. So, we want them in their areas, holding those problem-solving meetings, and actually bringing potentially other resources to support them with their problems than being pulled out to do other things. So that's certainly the work we're starting to see, really, which fits in with what Sean's just described.
And I just want to just go around just thanking all the officers and staff who've been involved in Primrose. I joined them. I've joined them on a couple of occasions, and it's been really fantastic to see the level of engagement with the public as well. And obviously, then looking on social media and the positive comments from residents who have really appreciated seeing that extra visibility, tackling serious issues in the area. Now, I know that in Luton Town Centre, they've got the issue with the aggressive begging, the problem drinking and drug use as well. Could this be replicated in that area? I know this is focused on Bedford Town Centre. I mean, similar problems. Could we do something similar there?
Without doubt, and that's the process the DCC outlined that. At the moment, so the local inspector for that area, if they don't feel they can tackle it on their own, they will come into force resourcing and force tasking to provide that support.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is just also to highly commend the extra high visibility presence of officers across certain parts of the county lately. It's been really positive to see the positive feedback that some of the residents are making in response to officers doing foot patrols. I saw one in Sharnbrook yesterday. That was really great. I saw one the mobile police office in Biggleswade and Singlesoul as well the last 2 weeks, and that was really good. Do we have any plans to kind of expand this and improve the frequency of this sort of visible foot patrols?
That's what they're doing, and I think the key is some of that sort of got shared on social media to make wider communities in those areas aware that it was happening, and that's where our social media academy, where we providing upskill in kind of that use of social media will help us amplify the fact we're actually here, we're doing this, and it's making residents aware that we're doing it. Obviously, every community's got its own forums where they're doing that anyway, and that's where we saw some of that really positive feedback. But I think particularly if we can just actually signpost, a bit more that activity is happening, that'll be really helpful for communities.
Now, I had a meeting with some councillors, I think it was Great Denham, they had a cluster meeting recently, and one thing they wanted to know was if it's not operationally counterproductive, would it be possible to make some of the parish and town councils, the councillors know when officers might be patrolling their local areas? So if they wanted to help or share information, that could be done, or from a logistics point of view, would that be a problem?
I think it's something we can ask community teams to work on. Sometimes we don't always want to advertise that we're there, but absolutely get the point. I think that's more than we can definitely pass that.
Yeah, I think if it's just going to be a case of them, we're going to be patrolling this area tomorrow. There is no intel that we're exactly dealing with. I think if they can make the council, rather than put it on Facebook that we're going to be here tomorrow, I'm talking about the council is aware.
And they do exactly that within Bedford Borough. I can give an example of where, as part of our community reach, we have Your Say Days, where the community teams will go around knocking on people's doors and asking them about some of their local priorities and concerns. And I know Mohammed Yassin has accompanied the team on a number of occasions and been part of that door knocking crew.
Actually, I was with the Kingston team on Friday, I think it was, and that was really positive. Now, this is happening in Bedford, but it's not happening in other areas. It's making councillors and elected representatives aware. Is that happening? Is that happening in
I will take that to make sure that people do reach out to those community members and councillors who would be of benefit to accompany them.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should just flag that we've got dedicated chief inspector in each local authority area that's got those relationships.
Yes.
So that conversation should be happening regularly, and there's a great opportunity because it's the same senior leader in the organisation with that responsibility. So we will re-emphasise that.
Because I think a lot of the councillors, they genuinely understand the level of pressure and demands that all of our officers are under, and they will not be able to contact them in all cases. But I think we just make a greater effort just to keep people aware of what's going on, because we need their buy-in to what we're trying to do within the community, and I think they will be a great asset to us now.
We've seen it go really well with Sergeant Boyd, it always knocks on clean napkins, that model really works.
The Queen is a big fan of Sergeant Boyd, by the way. And many people are.
Sergeant Boyd says she makes good captain.
Yeah, that is true. Excellent. Okay, thanks for that, Sean. And then move on to number 11 on effectiveness.
Yeah, let's make a commission.
Yep.
So, victim needs analysis first of all. So there are 20 main points of action that we needed to do with the force around just improving our levels of victim care. There's only one that I want to raise to this board today, which is the first one around the wider culture piece. Initially, when the V&A was written, there was a culture board. That's now gone, and we just wanted to reconfirm that the force is still happy to be taking the V&A actions in amongst the work they're doing around culture and promoting the importance of focus on victim when we're doing everything else that officers have to juggle, managing risk, managing vendor, that victim is still really up there as a priority. Because because it kind of links to my 11.2 signpost update, where we're unfortunately back down to about half capacity. So we're down to 427 internal referrals. We have capacity for double that. So it's just around how we can bridge that. And we've been doing some great work. Officers have been going out with signposts are going into team meetings. But the more we can do in that area would be great.
Yeah, so just in terms of the first bit, Claire, Victim and Witnesses Board should be looking at that, and if it's sensing any issues that we need to, there needs to be a wider look at them, that will be brought to the Force Executive Board internally. I think all of our kind of BU, we've included specifically on Be Compassionate, so that very focus on those things. So it's, we are. I don't think we need a culture board to deal with that, because we've come a step forward from the culture board. We've got specific Victims and Witnesses Board. Obviously, there's wider partnership issues, and we've got the Criminal Justice Board that can feed into. But internally, anything in terms of if that board feels it needs kind of the senior leadership team of the organisation, this is included in all of those kind of leadership conversations we're having across the organisation. Sean might add some bits about the signpost numbers, but I can tell you personally, we go to shift briefings, we talk to frontline supervisors. There is a bit of a clunky process bit that we need to do, but actually checking that we're doing that isn't too, that shouldn't stop us from doing this. So there's a lot of priorities. We just need to be reaffirming, particularly as the organisation has a high level of new people coming into the organisation and finding their way, that is super important to do. And certainly I can speak firsthand. I think we were at a briefing together over in Luton not so long back where we specifically mentioned to staff that the importance of ensuring that the signpost referral is done so that it actually goes through.
Yeah, thank you. That's it on those 11.3.
Yeah, on the victim satisfaction force,
Yeah, due to staffing issues, August we knew this, we weren't able to conduct any victim satisfaction surveys. That has kick-started again in September with a particular focus on domestic abuse and burglary residential offences. That will continue throughout the end of the year from that customer service support team until we get that automated service that will start in the new year. What I can report on, and this links back to the comment Claire made, in August we had 26 reports of dissatisfaction, and of those 26, 3 were referred to our professional standards department for further review. Of those 26, only 4 related to domestic abuse, and each of those is picked up by the DA Strategic Board. But the most important factor there, coming back to Claire's point, amongst those 26 reports of dissatisfaction, the most common theme, and when I say the most common, it wasn't common amongst all, it's probably only about 6 to 8 of them, was again in terms of communication, language, and linking back. So we're going to introduce that into the Be Compassionate, again, listening to your victims, understanding victims, or everyone that you deal with, and being compassionate when you're speaking with them, because that seems to be the most common theme that's coming back.
so that 26 satisfaction, that was for August, you said?
For August, yes.
How many did we get in total?
I've got that to hand. I report on every month, so it'll be a running total, but I've got that to hand.
The bit that we're working on with the Force Commission for the next step is recording the VCOP dissatisfaction. So that's the bit that we don't know the number of. And once they start using that hashtag in customer services, then we'll be able to understand the problem, and then hopefully we'll see any trend or issue that comes from it.
Do you have any figures for satisfaction for previous months? I might have missed that. So
Yes,
it's 26 for August.
26th of August, so I haven't got it to hand, but I'll report on that every month, so yeah, we'll have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then 11.4, data trains, including stopping search breakdown.
Yeah, so the data trends is two parts. The first part we've covered in terms of the performance reporting. The second part in relation to stock search is done quarterly, so that will be at next month's performance board, and we'll have the full quarter two data.
We've got.
Yeah, but for the month, yeah, but I'll talk through it in terms of the larger trend across the quarter.
And then 11.5 on recruitment again.
Councillor, can we say 11.5 and
11.5, sorry, yes.
So just high level in terms of recruitment, Chair, so you'll be aware that our target for police uplift, if I focus on police officers first, for 21-22 is 1,384 officers. Our forecast is that by the end of the year we'll be at 1,438, so 54 over our target. We're currently at 1,372, so halfway through the year we're 12 short of our target for the end of the year, which is a positive place to be. In terms of PCSOs, we've got an intake coming in at the end of October, which will take us over our establishment, and that will see us through until the next intake, which will be February, March. So we're content that the PCSOs will continue to remain at full strength all the way through.
And what is the establishment?
So the establishment for PCSOs is 53.
Will be pretty much maintained.
Yes.
Or maybe over.
Hopefully over, so that it never goes below 53 is the plan.
That would be reassuring.
Yeah.
To some of our residents and staff and PCSOs, of course. Good.
In terms of police officers, we've got a healthy pool in terms of the remaining intakes, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of representation, both in terms of female and visible black, Asian and minority ethnic applicants. The BAME, if I put it up for a moment, is around about 16%, so we still need to do work on that to increase it up, but 16% is okay in terms of where we are, but there will be some work to be done trying to get that into the 20%.
Those are applicants.
They are applicants.
How many actually make it through?
So they are, when I say that applicants, they're in the pool, have gone through the search process, the application process, so they're in pre-employment checks.
Okay.
So the only bits where they may fall down on is vetting and occupational health.
Have we done any, because I mean, I've seen some data around the number of applicants from the minority communities and the massive drop in terms of how many actually make it through vetting. Are you aware of that at all?
Yeah, so vetting is disproportionate in terms of the number of BAME student officers that fail vetting compared to white English or white British. Now, I won't go into the detail in this call, Festus, but there is a lot of work going on to understand that case by case. But what we're also seeing, which is the bit that's hindering us, is we're not doing any prioritisation around those candidates in terms of their vetting. So rather than looking at a pool of people and saying we've got 20 spaces to fill, what is the prioritisation to fill those 20? We're just taking the top 20 people and putting them through vetting. So we're just changing that process so we get a better split in terms of each pool that comes into the organisation.
Because I wonder, I mean, and by no means am I suggesting that we should be taking on people by way of vetting just because they're black or Asian. And of course, you want to get the best people coming through. But if there are any other reasons other than the standard or the quality or caliber that we're not aware of, I just want to be sure that we are looking into this and trying to address it.
Yeah, so our head of workforce will have a monthly meeting with vetting in terms of looking at all those people that are in the vetting pool and then keeping a track on those to make sure she understands whether they're passed, whether they're failed, and if they're failed, why they failed.
Right,
Okay. If I then talk about attrition, so we've seen an improvement in terms of attrition, but as I said last time, I can't say whether that is as a result of COVID or practices we've got in place, but the number of people leaving the organisation, particularly officers, is less than it was in previous years, and less in terms of those people with 0 to 2 years service. But we are doing some work now around the focus on 2 to 5 years service, because that's our next sort of peak. Just, however, you've got some data that shows in August the number of officers we left was 15, which is really high, but 8 of those were retirees. So when you start thinking about how many people actually left the organisation voluntarily, actually that's quite low, because it's the number of retirees, so just putting that caveat in that data. In terms of police staff, we have seen a peak in July and August in terms of the number of police staff that have left. I think what's encouraging about that is that we know why they've left, and it's useful to know that the majority of those are around career aspirations and lifestyle changes rather than culture of the organisation reasons for leaving. The issue we have around that is we haven't got a process for capturing all that information centrally. So at the moment it's ad hoc information that we need to go to capture. So we're trying to put a process in place, Chair, to try and pull that together so we can definitely do the lessons learned from some of those issues. But overall, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on any of that.
So we're still on track to have some data by January.
Definitely.
Right, okay.
Some questions?
Yes.
Just going back to recruitment, first of all, I've just got some concerns around the data. I know the percentages sound small, but in that area, a small change in percentage is actually like 20, 30 people, isn't it? Just in terms of representation. This paper 11.5 says representation is currently just over 10%. The paper at the end says it's at 9.3%. Looking at the gap we need to fill, so we're currently at 1362, we want to be at 1453. To get representation to 11%, you need 69 of the people coming in to be that. But in the orders intake, you've only got 1, which is about 6%, not the 16. And then the paper says that you're comfortable with it, but you've only got 45 people in the pool, and we know at least a third will drop out for various reasons. So I am missing something to get to the 69, because also we've missed all summer in terms of recruitment. We don't have the PC in yet who's going to be focused on recruitment. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to get that 69? Why are we so confident that's going to happen?
When you say 69, can I just repeat what you mean, 69?
So we would need 69 people to be from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background to get to 11% representation overall.
Okay, so I don't think we are saying that we're definitely going to get to 11% representation.
Okay.
I think what we are saying is we are focusing on making sure that we increase our representation in the organisation. It says approximately 10%, we're about 9.5 at the moment, and it fluctuates, as you say, with numbers. If one person leaves, that takes it down by a certain percentage point. In terms of the pool, so we've got 4 intakes left, so it's 16%. Even if we have 12, that would be 3 at each intake, which gets us to a reasonable amount. That's why I say we need to do some further work to get them into the 20%, because I think that's we need to get to about 25% to actually start impacting on that 10%. That's why the further work needs to be done. We've got an individual as a PC who's doing some proactivity work for us around recruitment stage. We're about to bring somebody else in to assist with that, and we're doing a lot of work in terms of the attrition side of that with our student development team, looking at how they work. We're not all officers, but putting extra focus on our BAME officers to try and keep those numbers in terms of attrition, so we're not seeing that percentage drop from 10% to whatever it may be in terms of 9.3 or 9.5.
Okay, so how do we change the 45? Are you saying that you're predicting that's going to go up?
So the 45 will be the 45, but we've only got 4 intakes left in the year. So we'll see some drop out in that 45 because of betting in our age, but we'll still have enough to be able to put another 3 in every intake.
Okay, so the 12, we're not going to be anywhere near the 11% then?
Yeah, I'm not sure we get 11% from.
Because we've achieved 11% before in the past, haven't we? So we want it to, back in 2016.
10% is the highest we've been, I think.
Okay.
10.5, I think it was.
So with 12 then, we're going to be below 10?
No, I think we'll be around about 10% by the time we get to year end.
Okay, so we'll take that as the target then. We're saying 10%.
If you want to set a target, then
I just wanted to come in on there because I think the 11 was where it's rounded up from 10.5, but just because the journey isn't finished, is it? At the end, when we get to April, we are still going to be even though our growth, the growing of the organisation, just with turnover through retirements and everything we see, we're still going to be bringing people into the organisation. And there's a real opportunity as that goes forward, as this sort of finds, I would suggest, Phil, that we can still make a really big difference as time goes on. So we've got that window doesn't close,
No.
is my point.
No.
We will continue bringing people in, and all that work will continue to make
But we'll be
improvements.
starting from a lower point, is what I'm saying, because of the gap between numbers we've got now and numbers we'll have at the end. Even if the majority of it are getting through, then our overall rate is going to be lower. So then we'll need to start on that work again from April, which is why I'm saying that the pool needs to be bigger now to have an impact later down the line, 'cause it takes 9 months.
Yes, so this is the pool to deal with the intakes we've got this
This
year.
Yeah,
So then we'll have another pool for the 22-23 year. And I guess our starting point is our starting point. What we're trying to do is make sure that starting point, we start increasing from that starting point and start making a difference in terms of the size of the representation of the organisation.
But I think it would just be good to know that year on year we're going to be seeing some increments, because and I suspect it's going to be very difficult to go from where we've come from to where we are now, and then try to get back to where we were in 2015-16 in an instant. And I'm very, very interested in the trajectory of our travel. And so long as you're aware of that, and it's something that we're actively trying to stay on top of, I'm satisfied with that. But another issue is I think there is a disparity in terms of the retention rate between ethnic minority officers and white officers. Do we know the reason why that is the case within the force? I'm sure this will be reflected nationally, I get that, but I'm interested in that police, quite frankly.
So in terms of, yes, at the moment we are seeing slightly disproportionate in terms of leaders, but that's because of the numbers you're talking about in terms of the difference between the representation in terms of white British in the organisation versus minority officers in the organisation. The general drive around leaving is the job itself. And actually, once they're into the job and understand how demanding the job is, and the NVQ on top of the demands, they then find it quite difficult to cope with both. Now, that reasoning is not different too much from a visible BAME officer compared to a white British officer, but we are seeing more work going in to try and focus on that attrition and making sure that those people that are having those problems are raising their issues early, so we can actually try and support them through it. But the reason is mainly that we're seeing.
Right. So you say that you don't think that there are any major differences in the reasons for leaving between the white British officers and non-white British?
Not that we're seeing, Festus.
All right.
And we're all absolutely in the same place where we want better representation in Bedfordshire. So there's a huge focus on that student experience. Obviously, we have been in overdrive in terms of bringing into people into the organisation, and if your focus has been on bringing in, our focus is now still on bringing in, but also on that experience of people coming through the organisation. So we are really, it reassures you, that's just getting under the surface of that and changing that experience and adapting. We're giving lots of effort into our tutors, we're engaging the student assessment team, we're understanding why people are leaving, but also before that, why they're thinking of leaving, so we can make a difference. So we are really focused on that journey, and we are making changes to it, and we'll continue to do that because we want the representation to improve, but particularly we don't want to bring people in and then lose them.
Yes.
So
Fundamentally, whether they're black, white, or Asian, it's the same goal. Good. I want to raise that because there might be specific or peculiar reasons for one group of people that will not be captured if you take a broad approach, which is why I was just asking about the specifics of some of the demographics.
And we are speaking to the support groups and really talking to the individuals themselves, because if we see any sense in anywhere in the system of disproportionality, then we will be tackling that
move on to the next one, number 12. But I want to raise some of the areas that have been brought to my attention, and file quality is one of them. Now, I think there's some positive news to be shared about this, but I found out recently that we have cases where case files were being returned by the CPS to Bedfordshire Police for different reasons, and I want to just know what is being done to try and address it. Because obviously, every case file that's returned is potentially justice being delayed for a victim of crime. And this is some cases we're talking about pre-charge case files that are being returned. I mean, what are we doing to address this?
So there's a number of things. Firstly, I just need to kind of say there's a little bit of caution with some of the data, because, for example, that data, actually the measuring is going to be changed. So we're going to get new guidance on what we measure, so it's more effective in assessing our performance, and that's across policing. So we're expecting that to be out in December. However, and an example of that is, something called first triage, which is if there is a box not ticked that says there is not all the witness statements in a file, then that's kind of goes in the rejection kind of category of that particular recording. But actually, maybe there's one witness statement missing that's fully articulated on a separate form, which is a narrative explaining this person was unwilling to cooperate, haven't been able to get that witness statement. However, all the evidence we need to progress this is actually included in the case. But technically, on current measures, that would not sort of pass that test, if you like. Probably the more meaningful measure is the actual files are looked at by a lawyer and then returned to the force, having been looked at by a lawyer. And I think the number we had returned the last month we recorded was 9. That's really low compared to where we were in March. So that's an improving picture.
Right.
Yeah, that's very good.
We're about to put in place from November a file quality team, 10 staff, if you like, gatekeeping those files. It's a significant investment from the force, as you said, because we want this to get quality right first time, and in the interest of justice for victims. So that's going to go ahead, and all of the kind of that will give us a very good level of quality assurance.
When do we expect that team to be in place?
So we're aiming to have the team up and running by November, but we've got a recruitment process ongoing, so it will gather capacity over time. But the comparison I would give is where we are a real high performer in this area is in our RASO team, so the rape and serious sexual offences. That's because it's a small team and we have an individual, Emma Langworth, who does a brilliant job of gatekeeping those files. This team will do what she does for everyone. So absolutely we're going in the right direction. A word of caution around some of the quantitative measures that currently exist, and that's recognised across the service, across sector. So that's going to, and that's likely to change from December anyway. But we're definitely going in a sort of positive direction now. Charlotte, is there anything else you want to add, or is that?
No, you've covered it perfectly.
Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Now, moving on to tutors. And obviously, we've got quite a lot of new intakes coming in, and that's great news, that's brilliant. I'm just mindful of the fact that we're expecting a lot of our new recruits, and I remain in awe of these new officers who are coming in, because maybe in your time, the stuff that they are having to do now at this stage of their careers, you probably couldn't do half of that. I'm sure you could, but you want to laugh.
I think it's fair to say that the tutor experience we now give is something different to what I got 27 years ago.
Right. I mean, I just want to be sure that the tutors, one, they're getting supported themselves because they've got quite a number of students that what they're working with, but also the quality of the support that the new recruits are getting.
Yeah.
There's a standard that we have in place, and that is being communicated adequately. Do we have that in place?
So tutors is, they are key, aren't they, because we've got so many students being tutored. And we've actually pushed a large proportion of our frontline workforce into being tutors. So they're all now attending a 3-day refresher training. So we're investing in that, and then the student development team are now the point of contact for all tutors and supervisors to provide support, because the supervisors are kind of adding another layer of support to that, so they can get advice from them at any time. Current plans for the future is we are really looking at those people who are going to be tutors for the new entry programme, because that's obviously different, requires different skills, and so we are carefully selecting individuals to kind of be the first ones to do that, because they will need additional support. So we've got Q&A sessions starting this week for all supervisors, looking at what the new tutorship will look like in terms of that. We've got an early, as I say, identification of who's going to be the first intake and to be the tutor, so they can get additional training from the student development team. And then when the first cohort of students land in that programme, we'll have weekly drop-in sessions for those tutors to kind of help them through that. So hopefully that's some reassurance to the public, but also a workforce who might be listening to that, because it's tough to be a cop on the front line and be teaching someone who's brand new at the same time.
And how do we expect this to change with the PQF?
Well, the PQF, we're actually going to have smaller numbers begin with going through that, because we're kind of dual running in that process. So the fact that we've got a smaller number of tutors means we can invest a bit more time and support in that experience, so we get it right before we start to expand that to becoming the norm in terms of entry pathway. So, hopefully there is a good plan to kind of take them through that. Phil, I've kind of stepped quite into your bit there, but you might want to add some more colour and quality to that update.
I think you covered it all. I think the only difference on the PCDA, which is new PQF, is we're going to see if there's any ability to create some protected sort of time for some tutors to do paperwork, etc., rather than doing it as part of their day shift.
Yeah.
Which I think will be a big improvement if we can achieve that.
What's the likelihood of that being able to happen at the moment?
It's early days, but that's our intention to try and achieve that.
Thanks. And lastly, on agenda number 12, on out of court disposals. Now, I understand we've had 6 the next steps. Well, how is that going at the moment? Sorry, if I'm getting the next steps and stuff.
Out of court disposals, there's different elements to out of court disposals. First of all, to give you some reassurance, we've got a dedicated out of court disposals coordinator who pulls all this together, who works within the file quality and team. Secondly, we went live with a new process just to start this month. So 1st of September there was a new process and lots of education for our workforce, covering the different elements such as community resolution, some of the support networks and mechanisms out there, criteria to make sure that we're listening to and taking into account the victim's voice, a matrix to help determine eligibility, authorisation and QA in terms of what the supervisor's responsibility is there. So lots of work gone into that, but because of the new process that started at the start of this month, I would say what we need to do is just give it some time to embed, and then we can report as part of the monthly performance framework those the trends in terms of use across the board, not just for specific areas.
So what's the overall objective here then with the out of court disposal? Are we looking to make that a mainstay of how we deal with the low to medium risk offenders at the point where they're being interacted with by the officers?
Without doubt, and to bring it right down to basics, if we can avoid putting people through the criminal justice process, the better, in terms of longer term investment. And what we do know as well is that we do have a number of cases whereby people come into the system and then they are subject to no further action. A huge bit of work that's been led by DCSD Perkins is around women within the criminal justice system and how they may be disproportionately dealt with. So the idea, as I said, break it down. It's about keeping people out of the criminal justice system.
What I would add to that, if I may, is a lot of these individuals have maybe an issue in their life that they need some help with, maybe an addiction. And they're not just coming into contact with police service, they're coming into contact with other services, and to take individuals who, through some help, won't come back into a number of services again. That's got to be the way forward. I'd suggest it's, you know, in line with, you know, the beating crime plan.
Yes.
It's right, you know, absolutely where we should be in terms of reducing demand and reducing people coming into the system.
So do we know how many, how we're using out of court disposal at the moment, how many we had last year compared to, do we have those figures?
Yeah, so that's part of the performance reporting and that's form part of the performance pack.
Right.
I think the figure I have is 48, I think, so far this year.
And what is the scope for what's the scope for increasing that number? What do you think?
That's the intention, that's why we put the new
Yeah.
process in place. We're actually having to say to supervisors, what is the reason why you haven't done this?
Yes, that's good stuff. Good.
So that's all part of the process, John.
Well, hopefully this time next year we'll be able to have some more good reports in terms of the increase in the use of that. Very
Sean will track that through his performance board.
excellent. Moving on to number 13, monthly performance of the Vero.
Yeah, there's a paper in the back. I'll just take out some key headlines. In August, there were only 8 referrals that came through into the Vero. That is down on the previous 2 months, which saw the highest over the year. But when we look back into last year, August is always a low number for referrals. And then the second part is because of some of the excellent work that we are doing in that space. That still leaves 65 open cases for the unit, and their focus for this coming month is Project Neon, which is educating and working with A&E staff, so that A&E staff are a little bit more inquisitive in terms of the questions they're asking to help support the wider agenda in terms of reducing serious violence and kickstarting the schools project. And this is the point where I have to come in and say, Commissioner, you're just one step ahead of me, because I wanted to test out the relationship Veru had and what they were offering. And yesterday I went to Denby High School. Somebody had already been there before me.
Yes, sorry.
I
won't do it again.
What you would have seen there, as I did yesterday, coming out of COVID, over 1,000 children back in schools, that's where the Veru needs to be working. That's where they are.
And actually, speaking of, I've got to pass on a special thanks to the Bedfordshire Police officers who have been interacting with one of the safeguarding staff at Denby High School, and they sang the praise of the officers who've been working with them, that they've just been absolutely exceptional. They've always been there, and in fact, the young people that they've been working with actually preferred working with the officers than with other agencies. I can't name any names, but I want to put that on record, just to thank the team for that. Okay, now number 14. Oh.
That's so any items you want to put on for next month, you wanted ASB?
Yes, only antisocial behaviour. I would like to just make sure we stay on top of the retention piece, just keep monitoring that, and also community policing as well. But also, we also want to look into the response teams. I'll discuss something I'd like us to touch base on that, just based on some of my discussions with some of the officers. But apart from that,
Okay.
yeah, and we'll end it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.